Okay, then I would like to start and to welcome you all to the second webinar of the RECONECT project. That is taking place today. For the next 90 minutes, we'll have a chance to first learn something about the RECONECT outcomes and results, and also to have a more interactive session with questions and answers. My name is Nataša Manojlović. I'm one of the members of the project management team, and I'm stepping in today for our coordinator, Zoran Vojnović, who last time introduced the project and explained all the context and the activities of the project. And this second webinar is a follow-up of what we have presented last time within our first one, where we introduced the big picture, the project itself, but also the big picture, what are our objectives, and also some of the high-level results and endeavors that we're trying to achieve within the project. This time we are getting more hands-on, and we'll be focusing now on the concrete results that were produced in our demonstrators sites. Demonstrators in the RECONECT project are the sites or the partners who implemented the nature-based solutions. So either starting from its construction phase, so really having or making their hands dirty and constructing, building the nature-based solutions, but also monitoring and evaluating them. And we'll have today 4 examples out of 10 demonstrators that we have in a project that either, what I've said, implemented them in the sense of constructing the nature-based solutions, but there were also some cases, and we'll have one that already had implemented some measures, but used the RECONECT time and the RECONECT project for extensive monitoring and evaluation. So we are really happy to present 4 of those cases. And today we'll start with with one of the 2 Danish cases that we have in the Sedenstrand in Denmark, presented by Lars Kidal. And then we'll continue with experiences from Italy and some from, experiences in prevention against erosion and shallow landslides in high value landscapes. So the Portofino Park case. And then we'll continue with a tour case from Switzerland, and we'll finish off this round with a presentation from the Elbe story, coping with floods and droughts through an NbS approach in northern Germany, in Hamburg. After those presentations, we'll have questions and answer sessions, what we have said, and so you will be able to post your questions in the chat, and we'll try to pick up those ones that are actually addressing the key issues of those presentations and issues presented. So I don't want to take too much time, and we will have some interesting presentations, and I'm really happy to also looking forward to discussion afterwards. Thank you. So as first presenter is Lars, and he will give a presentation on making room for the sea, NbS to improve protection of people, nature and landscape, the Sedenstrand case. So Lars, welcome, and the virtual floor is yours.
Thank you, Natasha. I'll just share my presentation with you in a minute. Just a minute. And hope everything is clear. Yeah, you can see my presentation now, Natasha.
No, not yet.
You can't see my presentation yet?
But I see your presentation.
Okay. Oh, sorry. Try now.
Now it's coming, yeah, I think. Yeah, very good.
Thank you. Sorry. And yeah.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Well, thank you much, everyone, and thank you for the word, Natasha. Well, my name is Lars Sonneby. I'm from the municipality of Odense, which is on the island of Funen. I'll just show you that in a moment. But just to come back to my agenda for my presentation today is that I want to talk a bit about, well, I have to give it quite a bit of time for the background for this solution that we have selected, because I think from our point of view that's very important why we have chosen a nature-based solutions, because you can say if I should be honest, that the type of nature-based solution we have made is, I can say, it's not rocket science. The installations itself, for us, it was just as important the approach to the solution that we have chosen, because trying to make synergies between the different interests in the area, and also why we should use a nature-based solution. That's, I would say, that's one of the main things for us in our work. But then, of course, I will also go into the design of the solution that we have chosen here in Odense, and also I will tell you a bit about what some of the monitoring that has been taking place in there, and it still is. But just to come to the background, I'm located in Odense, which is on the island of Fyn. Odense is the third largest city in Denmark, and also known to be the birthplace of the fairy tale writer Hans Christian Andersen, which probably most of you have heard about. And but Odense is also placed located close to the fjord, which is named after the city itself, Odense Fjord. And this area, Odense Fjord, is also designated as one of 17 risk areas of in risk of flooding in Denmark. So one of the areas there's a special focus on, where the municipalities around have to deal with that and have to make special plans for that. So I'll get a bit closer. You can see the fjord here itself, and where we have Odense here, and the project area is located here. And the challenges we have here is, especially when we have a strong wind from the west pushing water in from the North Sea into the Baltic Sea, and when we have a situation that the wind changes to the north, where water will be pushed into the fjord, and with settlements located in the bottom of the fjord, then you will have trouble with flooding. And this is something that had happened over years, but will increase in the future. And here I'll have you a closer picture showing the project area again at the settlement of Strandby, which is a settlement approximately 7 kilometers northeast of the center of Odense. This area, the settlement was established in the early 1930s, and they have in the last 20 years experienced several floods, especially the one they had in 2006, but also in 2013, where we had the first storm that was named just as they do in the United States, the storm Bodil, which had effects on several areas in the settlement of Strandby. And here you see this is also a picture from 2019, not only 1.50 meters, but still affecting parts of the area. You can see the areas being flooded. And this actually is a picture showing the project area before construction. But because of the area is being designated as a risk a special risk area in Denmark, we have also made these risk management plans, where we're trying to come out with the different solutions that we want to use in Odense. And the situation, which can be very difficult in Odense because of the change in climate, with the rising water level. You can see here we have the water level, the different flood events from, as it was in 2020, you can see a yearly flood event will change over years. So for instance, if you see here, These were the storms I've been talking about, the one in 2013 and the one in 2006. Just the storm in 13 was a 100-year event, but if we just move, 50 years from now, something will happen somewhere between 1 and every 5th year. So this will mean trouble, and not at least the one we had here in 2006 was quite larger, will have severe challenges for the area. So something has to be done in the area. But we're also facing some challenges with nature. The fjord itself and the surrounding habitats around the fjord is designated as a Nature 2000 area. Nature 2000 areas are areas in the European Union that are designated for where special interest for nature, where each member state has to make plans and also to improve the nature in the area. And the nature around Odense Fjord has changed severely over the last 200 years. You can see this map just showing parts of the inner part of the shore, showing where areas which were shown as salt marshes or meadows around the fjord for 200 years ago, and to the situation that we have now, where most of the areas has disappeared. Actually, we say that around the fjord, we approximately about 90% of all meadows, salt marshes, has disappeared over the last 200 years, and which has also had significant effect on wildlife around the fjord, especially for the birds, but also for amphibians like the natterjack toad here, which has completely disappeared because of loss of habitats around the fjord. So these two things around, you can see just with flooding and nature were something as a municipality, we had to deal with both issues. And that's why we're trying to see if we can find a solution where we can combine those interests. You can see here from the problem with the nature in the area is that what will happen if we say a yearly flooding in 50 years will up to 1.6 meters will affect areas which are now breeding areas for birds, but also ponds will be more saline because of more frequent flooding. But also not at least areas below 80 centimeters will completely be flooded permanently in the next years to come. So therefore, from a nature point of view, we need space to adapt to a changed climate, because the changed climate itself is, you can say, it's not a problem for nature, but the problem is that there is not enough space to allow nature to adapt to it. And this is the reason why we don't allow that is because we over the last 200 years have built a lot of dikes to improve the areas for farming. And so with another approach allowing the areas to adapt to a changed climate, we will also have to give space to nature. I'm showing the consequences here. I've been allowed to use this from COVI, a consultant firm in Denmark, who had made a major survey of what the effects of changed climate would have for nature around the coastline in Denmark itself. And they showed illustrated that here. This is a typical situation where we would have a salt marsh, which quite often will be bounded by, there will be a small minor dike here. And typical situation, what many would say, well, we want to protect the farmed area, we will build the higher dike. But this will have severe consequences for the areas in front of the dike. So if we just go for this solution, habitats will disappear around the fjord in Denmark completely actually, but not at least around Odense Fjord. And this is with the result coastal squeeze, where we don't allow nature to move further inland. Instead, we could go for a maybe more nature-based solution, would then mean that we should give up areas, well, change the use or the land use as it is now, and allow water to move further in and allow the areas to adapt to the higher sea level. So in this situation, this would mean that the way we use the land here would have to change over years, and then instead we should allow nature to move further in. So this is, from our point of view, a nature-based solution. So from that point of view, we had a preliminary project made already 10 years ago, showing from the east, about the east side. To start it, I have to tell that with the situation with flooding in their area, we are actually talking about two projects. The project in the RECONECT project is focused on the east side, where to completely protect the settlement against flooding, you would also need to have a dike built on the north and the west side. And they actually split up to two projects. And the reason why we have done that is because you can say on the east side, we find there's space for a nature-based solution. But on the north and west side, we will go for a more, you can say, more traditional solution. Because on this side, there's actually not really any space to allow nature to adapt on this side, unfortunately, because on this side, we have houses and gardens very close to the coastline. So in this case, we would just have to build dikes in the gardens themselves, and because of that, there won't really be much space for nature on this side. So that's why on the north and the west side, that's not really a nature-based solution, but the nature-based solution that we are talking about will be on the east side. So what we are going to do is we'd had a look on the present dikes at the time were located here. Actually, they are also going all the way up here. We had the original dikes quite close to the coastline, and trying to look for an area where we say, well, maybe we should go for a solution where we would relocate the dike further inland, and then allow nature to adapt, but also to protect the nature, protect the area against flooding, improve the flooding. And afterwards, we had also added an extra area because of the possibilities to make improvements for nature. And besides in relocating dikes, we would also, I think someone has to shut Lisbeth. She has to.
Could you please just mute your mics? I mean, all of you, so that we can concentrate on the presentation. That only the presenter is with a microphone. Thank you.
Thank you. No, we had to relocate, and we have made several plugins in the area. We have re-established natural streams. We had made water-filled depressions, and we'll build in plugins on the backside of the dike. And here you see the design of the dike we have made with flat slopes, with parts on the area with sandy parts and with stone beds on the area. We have tried to make a more landscape-friendly dike, also from a landscape point of view, to allow as we move further inland, we also allow the area not to have large technical installation close to the sea, but also what is very important for us in the future, protection of the dike and maintenance of the dike, to allow grazing. So actually we made it with so flat slopes that we would allow horses and cattle to graze the dike on both sides for most of it. And with that design, we started construction in 2020, as you can see here, with showing some of the pictures from the construction. And this also included introduction of the NetJack tool. And this is how it looks afterwards. This actually shows the situation 2002, which is before. You can see the areas that were used for farmed land, and here you see the situation after the construction. You can see the dike has been relocated up to here, we had with the new streams and the new depressions in the area for the amphibians. And monitoring, well, which were of course very important for us. We had a baseline we used in cooperation with Eurosense, which is one of the partners in the RECONECT project. We had a LiDAR that was taking place. You can see before and after, and actually you can see from this is a yearly frequent flooding. You can see the water is coming more often, which was the intention with the project, to allow a more dynamic flooding regime, which is an improvement for the area itself. But on the other hand, we would also have improved the flooding of the protection of the area, and this is showing the 1.5 meter event which happened in 2019. In this case, I've actually already built in the new north and western side dike. You can see here, as it was before, we have improved the protection area. The same with the event we had in 2006, up to 1.9 meters. You can see here that the area is the protection of the areas has improved. We have also monitored the nature beforehand and afterwards, and one of the things we have of course focused on has been birds, and we have counted birds before and after, and we had a special focus on wading birds, which was some of the bird species we wanted to improve the habitats for. And you can see, because they are very dependent on the water regime and large areas, open areas for this, and improvements for them, whereas breeding and scrub birds would probably not benefit from this, as we were cutting down most of the trees in the area as well. And yes, happily we can see there is already minor increases, but the trend is that the conditions for wading birds has improved. Not surprisingly, the conditions for breeding for scrub and forest birds has not improved, but this comes to the reason that we have cut down all the trees, which were actually also one of the things we wanted to do. So, and you can see also here, as I've shown it here, and especially what I find is quite interesting is the last one I have here. You can see as also the way birds are using the area. As beforehand, most of them would use the area further up north, and now they're using a much larger area after construction. So that's all for me. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lars, for, very good overview of all the activities that were taking place in the last 3, 4, 5 years during the project lifetime. I think we should move to the next presenter. In the next presentation, we are shifting the part of Europe to Italy. We are now in Park Portofino, and Guido Pagliaga will give an overview of the activities and the lessons learned from the Portofino Park. So Guido, you can just take over and start your presentation.
Thank you, Natasha, and good morning to you all, and welcome to this second RECONECT webinar. I'm Guido Pagliaga, and in charge of GISIG from the Portofino cluster, which is composed by the Natural Park Portofino Park Authority, from CNR IRPI, which is National Research Council of Italy, and a department, the staff department of the University of Genova. And I will guide you through the activities we have realized here in Portofino. So let's start with our with the peculiar feature of our environment, of our landscape here. We are in a quite different situation from the one presented from Denmark, by Lars. We are in a Mediterranean landscape area. The Portofino promontory is something like a mountain landscape thrown into the sea. So we deal with a morphology which is dominated by steep slopes, really small catchments, which means in terms of hydrological risk, very reduced time of concentration. We have a peculiar microclimate, which is in winter, for example, which is really warm in the southern part of the promontory, and on the contrary, It may be even freezing in the northern part of the promontory. So in a very small area, the variability is really high, both in climate and in vegetation and in habitats and so on. It is a Natura 2000 area, and it is a natural park, as I mentioned before. Altitude it culminates with the Monte Portofino, which is 600 meters above sea level in a very, very small distance, at a very small distance by the sea. You can see less than about 1 kilometer straight line. So we are in an area which is characterized by high geomorphologic hazard and a high number of exposed elements, high value exposed elements. And the reason is related most of all by the fact that in the regional climate here is dominated in winter and in fall, most of all in fall, by strong and intense rain events, which may be hit even in other periods of the year, but may reach, just to give you an idea, a maximum intensity of about more than 100 millimeters per hour. We may reach even 150 millimeters per hour. So with these small catchments and strong and a reduced time of concentration, problems usually develop in small catchments, like the ones you can see here in yellow, which are the pilot area of our project in the old promontory. Problems may originate along the slopes and may reach very, very quickly the stream mouth, where human activities and exposed elements are typically concentrated. Here you can see a land cover map of the promontory, and we can see that larger part of the promontory are occupied by urban settlement, here and here in Santa Margherita and Camogli, but many important places are present even at the stream mouth of our pilot areas, with important heritage, cultural heritage elements and infrastructures and tourism facilities and so on. What are the project drivers in our case? Geomorphologic hazard, as I told before, which may cause flash floods, and the activation, the triggering of shallow landslides, which may move very, very quickly from the slopes and reach the river, the stream mouth. I mean, they can move at a velocity of about 5 to 6 meters per second. So their impact may be, and is really, really dramatic, may cause really high damages. And we have several of these, we have had several of these events in the last 20 years. One of the important, the peculiar element of the landscape are the terraces, man-made terraces. The area has been settled till, I mean, about 1,000 years by now. So we presume that terraces, the older terraces we have got here, have been built and stay here from 1,000 here. So they are an element which is part of the landscape, part of the nature, a peculiar habitat have been developing on terraced slopes. And I have to say that most of them are actually in a complete state of abandonment. So they play a different role actually, because they play the role of possible source of shallow landslides and mud flow and mud debris flow. So the project drivers and our strategy has been try to reduce all the problems originated in the small catchments and trying to approach the solutions at a holistic scale, ecosystem-based approach, with the holistic system-based approach. So it means that we try to point out solutions spread along the catchment that may act all together, and they may give their result in order to reduce the risk in the whole catchment. So focusing on the strategies, on the elements, we pointed on reducing the linear erosion along the streams, reducing the widespread erosion along the slopes, the really steep slopes, increasing the stability and improving in general hydraulic and geohydrological conditions, even focusing on footpath maintenance, which is a really important element considering the many people that comes and visit every year the promontory. We have about 400,000 tourists that visit some areas, but in Portofino, for example, are estimated more than 2 million tourists per year. So even the impact is an element which is very important, not only the exposed elements and the people exposed to a risk too. So our catchment scale holistic ecosystem-based approach is based on small interventions spread along the catchment. We can't make a very, very strong work, and we don't need to do that. We need an approach which is based on maintenance and prevention measures that works all together. For example, through water melioration and reforestation, through geohydrological and meteorological monitoring, using natural engineering interventions and bioengineering interventions, and so on. And we see such a kind of approach as a paradigmatic of the approach we should follow at the regional scale, because we live in a small region here. We deal with problems which are similar all along the region, all along the coastline, and such a kind of approach could be applied even to small catchments, but even to sub-catchments. So we will be able to see after what are the solutions in particular. So the first step we have approached is the knowledge. I mean, if you don't know the real dimension of your problems and of your territory, it is impossible to find solutions. So these are on the right. You can see our pilot areas, and you can see here on the table the main geomorphological features of the 3 small catchments. As you can see, in particular, the mean steepness of the slope of the catchments is really, really high. I mean, about 70% in the number 1, but we reach even more than 50% in the number 3, which is the larger catchment in the area, and is only 1.5 about square kilometers. So really small catchments with so many problems. And high modification from people, from the human beings. So the first step in monitoring has been the precise identification of the modification the man has made with terraces along the catchment through precise terrace identification through LiDAR data survey, which has been performed with the help of Eurosense, one of the partners of our RECONECT project. So we could identify very precisely the position of terraces, of stone wall terraces, and we could even develop a methodology to assess the soil which is trapped into terraces, which is an important element to perform a numerical modeling simulation of what may happen in case of shallow landslide triggering, which we have seen that has been often triggered in terraced areas. We can see some example of data elaboration algorithms. Different algorithms have been applied to LiDAR data in order to point out the geomorphological features, not only the presence of man-made terraces, and we can see some details. For example, in San Frutuoso pilot area, we can see here the photography. We can see here the application of roughness algorithm, which may put in evidence very clearly here, for example, terraces. Most of them, as I told before, are in abandonment here and here, but we can see recognize even other features. For example, here the foot trays. We can see even areas with debris accumulation, landslides, and so on. We can see, for example, with other kinds of algorithm applied to LiDAR data more morphological features. We can see here another example. We can even evaluate the flow accumulation of running water, which is a very important element in order to evaluate the areas, terraced areas that may be triggering shallow landslides, because we can have we have to deal with many different factors that may influence the possibility of shallow landslides triggering, but the water, the concentration of water, is the triggering element. So such a kind of elaboration is really, really important. Another aspect we have dealt with is the spatial relationships between the exposed elements. We can see here on the left side the San Frutuoso area and the catchment number 3 stream mouth Paraggi area on the right side of the image. We can see we've got important elements and a peculiar characteristic of this small catchment. We have the final stretch of the stream, which have been culverted here and here. And these elements, of course, is another problem in our in managing the risk of the area, because if you deal with flash floods and with shallow landslides that move very quickly from the slope, such kind of human interventions may be very quickly saturated with their capacity of discharge. So what are the solutions in particular we are dealing with? In San Frutuoso area, we have realized an improvement of the draining of running water in some small compluvium. We have improved the stability with rebuilding of stone walls terraces. So we realized stone walls recovery and maintenance, and even with environmental engineering of slopes. We properly planted Mediterranean ectoconus shrub species to reduce erosion and improve again slope and footprint stability and safety. And we have realized even interventions of compluvium maintenance with selective vegetation cut and erosion reduction. We can see here the example was the situation before on the right with this erosion in incised and both incision and laminar erosion, and with the actual solution immediately after the recovering of terraces. We can see here another area. Here we are along one of the most important and interesting and fantastic trails we've got here in the Portofino promontory. We can see here the bioengineering solutions. We can see even other interventions we made here with selective weirs. For example, just we need such kind of interventions to intercept floating elements that are moved during intense rain events. Here we are in the second area, the catchment number 3 in Paraggi. You can see some other spread interventions along the small catchment, again with terraces recovering in the area 1 and 2, and other with selective weirs here, and vegetation maintenance here, and footpath maintenance and recovery. We can see again here some images from these small areas, again with the terraces recovering and maintenance here, and with the stabilization even of small shallow landslides. Here are some other examples of bioengineering techniques to reduce the instabilities, even some other examples after the interventions and before the interventions, you can see. Then, to sum up, the risk mitigation strategy we used has followed these phases, improving the knowledge before has been the first step through the monitoring. Then assessing possible solutions and designing a system of intervention that are able to work in an integrated way. So compluvial maintenance, stone walls recovery, selective weirs, building, footpath maintenance and recovery, and vegetation maintenance. Then the design phase and then the stakeholder involvements have been through all the passages, the steps before. We have dealt with different problems, of course. We have learned, for example, and we have learned some lessons and found some barriers. The importance of the twin monitoring, I have already mentioned, but you have even some difficulties in realizing interventions due, in some areas, due to private ownerships. This is the most important barrier we have dealt with. Then, an important element is related to upscaling, as I mentioned before. The geomorphological features of our pilot areas are paradigmatic of the whole Ligurian and Mediterranean area: small catchments, high slope gradient, urbanization in the lower part, stream in the final stretch that are completely culverted, short time of concentration, and then high geological risk. So these kind of features are common along the Ligurian coastline, but even in other areas: Balearic Island in Spain, Côte d'Azur in France, Greek Island, Montenegro coastal areas, but even in the Alpine region and Apennine and South Italy regions, as we know. As I mentioned before, our approach may be applied both to small catchments, but even to sub-catchments, so we can scale it up and make it act even and apply it even in other areas. So it is all for me, and I wish to thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Guido, also for this very comprehensive presentation. And we are, again, in coastal areas, but showing totally different issues and challenges we're facing while designing and constructing in comparison to what Lars presented, but also demonstrating the comprehensiveness of the reference base that we are trying to create in RECONECT. Now we are changing again geographically, moving to Switzerland and the river tour, and we have Mario's presentation on the issues and challenges encountered there and the solutions to be presented. So Mario, you can take over and upload your presentation.
Thank you very much. So I will share my presentation. Can you see it?
It's coming, yeah, it's coming.
Okay, so you see my presentation. Perfect. So yeah, thank you very much for the opportunity that I can present here our tour case. So it's an inland water, of course, it's a river. And I have the pleasure to present on behalf of the AirBag team. So the tour catchment, to give you an overview, is south of Lake Constance, and it's a catchment of about 1,700 square kilometers. And the special thing at the tour is that it is the longest Swiss river without any artificial or natural retention areas. So there are no dams, there are no lakes. So whenever it is raining and the river receives water, the water very quickly goes through the valley, through the river. So it is a very dynamic discharge system. So it can be between 3 cubic meters per second up to 1,100 cubic meters per second. So here you see actually the river already at about 50, in the beginning at 50 cubic meters per second, and in the end about 900. So I will restart this video. So in the beginning it's about 50 cubic meters per second. Sorry. And then with rain, the river really rises rapidly just in a few hours. So it's a very interesting river system, but also, of course, it is very challenging. So to give you a little bit an historic overview, you see here how the Tor River looked like just 200 years ago. So you have a lot of meanders, so the river has a lot of room to spread when there are large rain events. And of course, this can cause flooding, but the floods are probably not so large. But then, by the end of this 19th century, people in the Tur Valley, the population was growing, and so land was needed for agriculture, for communities, for cities, and for this, the people built levees around the Tur River at large stretches. Here you can see how this was done. So there are significant modifications of the river valley, and this didn't only happen at the Tur River, it happened in many other rivers in Switzerland and across Europe. So and then what comes out when you have such a correction, that you have very straight rivers. So they are really almost channelized. So and levees protect the surrounding areas from flooding. But what we realized was that here are two examples from the years 1977 and 1978 through large flooding events that went over the levees. So you see they caused a lot of damage. So and the floodings at this time were even more severe than the flooding that happened in the centuries before. So and that's why in the early 1990s, the discussions in Switzerland started to think about how could we go back to a more natural system again. So Tur River restoration discussions started. But of course, there were lots of debates between different stakeholders and a lot of challenges that we had. Like, what would be the public acceptance? What would the farmers say along the Tur River? What do the towns and people in the communities say? If we do some mitigations, can we guarantee that the floods are less as they were in the years 1977, for instance? Also, ecological improvement should be done, but would this really be improved? And of course, there's also always the discussion about money. How expensive would this be to do that? And of course, there also come different limitations due to the multiple uses that we have, like rivers used for recreation, but also farming around. But there's also drinking water production, and to this particular case, I will say a little more. So here you see how a river would look like when we have it before restoration. So this is the upper picture here. Usually we have a main channel with engineering constructions, and then we have the levees. And we hope that when the river rises, that it stays between the levees. In many parts of the Tur, the river is a losing river. So water from the river goes into the subsurface and feeds the aquifers. So also water goes to the side channels, and the side channels at some point in time then go back into the Tur River. But what you see here also is in the Tur Valley, there are a lot of drinking water production wells. So these wells are used to produce drinking water. Now, in the lower picture here, when you allow river restoration, sometimes with levees and sometimes you take even the levees down, of course, the river has much more room, but also you have much more hypereik exchange, so much more oxygen is getting into the water, so contaminants can be degraded. But the distance between the river and the pumping well is shorter. And in Switzerland, the water has to be in the subsurface at least for 10 days before it can be pumped for drinking water production without treatment. So this is, of course, a potential conflict between river restoration and drinking water production. So then finally, in the year 2004, the Tur River restoration started. Here you see some pictures where the construction is ongoing. The engineering structures were taken out. So the river was given more room. It was the goal that this forest of national importance, this former floodplain forest, that this is reconnected to the river, so to become again a floodplain forest. And this is how it looked like then. So the forest was connected, so gravel benches were created, and the river is moving. So here's in the beginning of the century, 2005 to 2008, so the river was restored. And still, you see, many changes are still always ongoing. So it's not a steady state in the sense that it is totally done. The river's still working on this site. So here you can see another picture how it looks like. But also we had problems. So the tour sometimes was really eating up a lot of the site of the river, and then again an intervention had to be done. Here you see this. So there was some construction done in order that not in agricultural land that is further away from the river will be eaten up. So still the Tour is a wild river, as you can imagine from the small video we saw in the beginning. So then this after the second restoration, after the second intervention, then you see now that it became more stable and the floodplain forest is still connected. So now after the second intervention and the site was more stabilized, then we came in to do a lot of different monitoring activities. So you here see this, we put this in within the project, within RECONECT. We have different indicators, and I can only touch a few of them. So there are indicators for water, for nature, and for people. So we had a lot of, we built a large database. We had these observation towers. This is where you saw one of those, this one, you saw the video that was created. We had lots of piezometers to look into the groundwater, the surface water groundwater interactions, the meteorology, but also a lot of soil monitoring and ecological monitoring. So here for the water indicator, a huge database with river water levels to really understand what is ongoing between the surface water and the groundwater. And many different things. We also looked into the contaminants, micropollutants, and we also looked already into microplastics, how microplastics is transported along the river and also into the groundwater. So here there was this growing concern of the water suppliers that were along the Thur River, and especially also at the Niederneuenfond site. There is a drinking water production well close by. And they were concerned about microplastics, that this from the river, we measured it in the river, of course, because there are many wastewater treatment plants along the river. And then this would go into the aquifers and maybe contaminate the drinking water production. But I can say from the preliminary studies we made, we can say that the sand and gravel aquifers held the microplastics back. So in terms of nature, we also had a lot of different indicators we looked at. So we investigated the floodplain forest. This is now reconnected and is almost like a natural system, or is adapting further and further. The little ringed blower is a big success of the of this restoration, because this little bird was gone for more than 100 years, and this bird needs gravel bars in order to breed. So it doesn't have nests, so that predators cannot find the eggs. So it just puts it into the gravel bars. The eggs look like the gravel, and so that's why this bird came back. And so bird watchers are very happy about this success. And we also did biodiversity assessments. This is shown here. So we looked into the restored parts in comparison to the non-restored parts. So we made this comparison, and we saw that in terms of species richness in all different locations, species richness increased, so improved in comparison to before restoration. We also had a lot of discussions with the people, the communities, the Agency for the Environment around, to see how people feel about this restoration. So we had discussion rounds. We sent questionnaires out and evaluated them. We saw that there's a big acceptance of these nature-based solutions, at least in the Thur Valley. But we also talked about these potential conflicts, for instance, between drinking water production and the people that really are happy about the ecological improvements. And we also looked into the financial aspects. So there was a cost-benefit analysis, which showed that the improvement with the services that come with such a river restoration, this is backed up with the costs. So now, of course, with all this, we have to go to a larger scale. We looked at the site at Niederneuen from here, but now with our knowledge that we created, our work together with the Agency for the Environment of the Canton of Thurgau, we plan now additional and started already additional restoration nature-based solution sites here in Wieden and Sulgen. Wieden, it is basically done. In Sulgen, we are still in the phase where constructions are ongoing. So this means that the knowledge we gained and the good experience we had, we can now put onto a larger scale. And with this, I thank you very much for your attention. Very happy that I could present this in the name of the entire EAWAC team. And then maybe if in the end, if there are more questions, then or if there are questions, then we can discuss this. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mario, very much. Also very nice to see some tangible outcomes and results and benefits of the nature-based solutions that you were implemented, or you have implemented. Also very, just maybe interesting to mention that you entered the project with already implemented measures and use the time in RECONECT to do monitoring, intensive monitoring and evaluation. And this is also very good to see that, I mean, like on the long run, that we can already identify some benefits for nature and do the co-creation with the people. And I thank you very much for that. Now we are switching to the last presentation. That will be given by Christian Ebel and will reflect the work done in the Elbe story in the area, but focusing on a specific area behind the dikes. So Christian, I would like to ask you to share your presentation and upload it to the WebEx, and then you can start already.
Just a moment, I will show it you in a minute. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
I hope yes. Let's see. Okay, this is this. You are now with me. You should be now with my presentation, right? Yes. Thank you very much, Natasha, for the introduction. We are a bit behind schedule, so I will try to speed up my presentation a little bit in order to save a bit also for the valuable discussion. The title of our presentation is Coping with Floods and Droughts Through a Nature-Based Approach, the case of the Elbe Estuary. On the agenda, I've placed basically 6 items. First of all, I'd introduce to the characteristics of the demonstrator area in Hamburg, which is quite different from the others which we just saw. Perhaps the most similarity is with Lars's demonstration area in Odense. Then I will show you the demonstrator area, the challenges and objectives connected with our activities. Then I will introduce into the hybrid approach of nature-based solutions which we use in Hamburg. I will show you a short browse through the results of the implementation of the solution so far. Then I dedicate a bit of time to monitoring water, people, and nature indicators. And then I will jump into what we've learned so far from the project. And I can promise you our experiences were quite valuable for us as professionals who tackle this subject more frequently. Let's jump into the demonstrator area in Hamburg. I have to put this away. As you know, Hamburg is a city-state located on the river Elbe and not located at the North Sea, as many foreigners very often presume. I've highlighted here the demo area. Basically, the demonstration area is here highlighted by this area. It's quite a complex area, which is confined to the Elbe River by a dike. And as the tidal influenced Elbe River reaches high tide of 2 meters 10 regular astronomic height of the tide, the area needs to be protected by a main dike following the river's stretch. You could see that if we had no dike on the Elbe River, the whole area would be flooded twice a day. It is an area which is basically utilized as drinking water supplier for Hamburg area. We have the supply of water from the Elbe, from the Bille coming in, or we take water from the Elbe River into the water protection area of Courslack-Altengamme. This is an area dedicated exclusively for drinking water provision, so it has its own importance. The critical issue in this area is that we have runoff from the Bille River into the area, and we have only one area, which is the dike lock at Tatenberg, where drainage is only possible by gravity, meaning if the water level at the Elbe River is too high, the area cannot be drained by gravity, and we have no pumping installations in the area. Meaning if we stop evacuating or draining the area, we would see an overflooding by the offload of the Bille River. The water table, please remember that on the Dove-Gose Elbe behind the dike is at 90 centimeters, and the astronomical tide varies between 1.45 meters below sea level and reaches usually 2.10 above sea level, meaning that you only have drainage possibilities of the area if the outer dike Elbe water level is 90 centimeters or below this critical mark. Here I've graphed this. You could see to the right the demonstrator area confined by the black area, and you could see the upper catchment of the Bille River, which drains directly into the area over a weir. The catchment area is 100, and our demonstrator region is roughly 160 kilometers square, and we have a total catchment of 507 kilometers square of Bille River, which basically brings all the water into the area, plus what we could expect from precipitation. I have sketched up to the left a principal sketch of what we are facing. You could see the runoff from the upper area into the marshland of Dove Elbe, where the water level is 90 centimeters, and the Elbe River outside the dike, schematized by the black line, is between 49 and 222 centimeters above tide level. Remember, we can only drainage the area by gravity. The specific challenge of the greater area relies that at floods, meaning at extended high floods, we lack drainage possibilities, and it gets even more critical if it is overlaid with extreme precipitation in the catchment area of the Bille River. On the other hand, in summer, we might also face droughts. With less rainfall, we face rather low runoff quantity of the Bille River, which is usually used to be deviated into the drinking water protection system, which is not longer possible if the water flow of the Bille River reaches a certain minimum flow. So we had basically to look for the optimization of the operation of the dike lock, enhancing the drainage, and the optimization of the retention volume management in the water system itself. What we did is basically we applied a hybrid approach. I will show you later on what we understand by this hybrid approach, and we have a contribution to the optimization of the inland flood protection. And the third leitmotif is the contribution to securing the drinking water supply of Hamburg anytime. Hybrid solution we apply in Hamburg consists in a proactive lowering of the water table of the Dove-Elbe system by a real-time supported weather forecast system which operates the drainage installations. Meaning, if we see unfavorable weather conditions coming up or increased off run from the bille, we lower proactively the water table of Dove-Gose-Elbe in order to gain residual storage volume by lowering the water table. And on the other hand, the activation of additional attention areas has also been checked with our project. We checked the effect of lowering and modifying floodplain lanes and forelands, and we also checked the effectivity of the connection of isolated surface water bodies in order to gain storage volume for precipitation. The results we developed so far. Marion, kannst du mal kurz aufhören, bitte? Bitte? Kannst du bitte aufhören? The operating instructions in the event of we will modify the operating instruction in the event of flooding. We have calculated with a numerical model the possibility of lowering the water table by 20 centimeters of the predicted flood. We will drain the area through 3 screen culverts. Nowadays, the drainage was being organized by 2 screens. The extension of the drainage time is being increased by expanding the water level table between outside and inside from 160 to 190 meters. In short, the prediction model looks into the weather forecast in real time, combines it with a predicted flood-based flood management, and checks for the water level prediction of the astronomical tide, and from that it operates the drainage installations. I will show you shortly the effect of lowering the water level with a barrier tide happening. You could see that between the 4th and 5th of January, the evacuation of the area is not possible. And you could see that in case we proactively lower the water table before the event takes place, the effect of preactively lowering the water table is with a barrier tide at a range of 15 to 20 centimeters, and without a barrier tide 50 centimeters. And the increase of the drainage capacity we create by draining the area by 3 culverts instead of 4 increases the drainage capacity furthermore. We have checked this against the model calculations against a real-time event, which really happened. We had a very strong flood in 2022 with a precipitation of 53 to 87, with 2 periods of strong precipitations in the area, being 53 millimeters being observed between the the 3rd and 10th of February, and 87 millimeters with 87.4 millimeters precipitation. And I'll show you some pictures of the effect. To the left is the dike log at Tatenberg at low tide. Here you could see that the area gets over flooded, and this is something we would certainly want to avoid. This is now the situation in real-time demonstration. You could see that the water between the 16th to the 21st was continuously rising inside the Dove-Gose-Elbe system and reached a maximum of 1.89. And this was the highest water level ever observed in the Dove-Elbe system. But it would have been, if we wouldn't have steered the dike log according to our calculations, the water level would have been 2.10 meters, exceeding the dike protection limit. So we could avoid an overflooding catastrophe behind the dike by applying this new steering possibilities of the water management installations. You could see a detailed demonstration that we gained, in fact, 15 centimeters of lower water level by using this new steering mechanism. We have been looking to water indicators concerning water levels. We have been checking the flood events against calculated water levels. This worked rather well, but we also realized that during the flood, the water level registration had still deficits because registration intervals were too long in order to check it further. So we had to retune our water observation system for further and future events. We have checked people indicators by sending out a questionnaire to the public by directly mailing 1,500 people, by distributing this questionnaire, checking for the awareness of the potential threat of an inland flood, and also asking for the willingness to pay to preserve green spaces and enhancing inland flood security. This was a questionnaire developed by the colleagues from the Technical University in Denmark. And what I'm showing you here is our preliminary results from our team, where we checked if the flood risk perception in the area is well present in the minds of the people, and the importance of green spaces. As we sent out the questionnaire just after the flooding took place, it is no wonder that many people perceive now the argument. I strongly agree that there is a high risk, that there is a high level of risk. And also it was stressed that the importance of green spaces for the is a very important factor for the people who filled out the questionnaire. We checked for the willingness to pay, and we thought, surprisingly, that 57% would be willing to pay for flood protection, and 43% said, no, we do not want to pay for flood protection. We perceive this as a sovereign task of the public administration, and the tax burden is already high. But nevertheless, 57% are willing to showed certain willingness to pay, and this also opens the door to the co-decision and co-creation in future. We also checked the nature indicators in the area. With the monitoring takes place according to the different European directives in this area, and we have a good data set. But we do not expect from our nature-based solution a change of the biodiversity, but if best a stability of biodiversity and species richness and composition. But we have a good data set from the different monitoring activities required by the European directives. And what we learned as lessons, first, we learned that the development of a rainfall runoff model onto a flood forecast model is quite costly, and it is costly concerning the integration of the different data paths and the coordination of data paths we have to handle. Not so much from the amount of money, but to channel and funnel all the data coming up into the model is quite complicated and quite a challenge. Yeah, the operational rainfall model we are using is quite stable. There are rarely any data failures. That is good news. And the evaluation of the considered flood event was difficult because we had some data lags in the empirical WAN data. And that leaves us to the conclusion that data situation for monitoring cannot be good enough. So the more data you have, the better you can tackle the problems.
Thank you very much, Christian. And I think also another approach that we also applied within RECONECT.
That was basically my last slide, and I'd like to thank you all from my team.
Thank you. And well, it also partly answers a question that was posted in the chat about the land that is available. And this was approached, which you have just presented, using this kind of smart NbS technology, which optimizes the use of the existing area before you start acquiring further land. Also, thank you for all presenters. Yes. We are quite advanced in time, but it's obvious. I mean, like, we needed more time to get into more details and understand what is actually happening in all those cases to be able to post questions. So I would like to switch to the questions and answer session. We have received a few questions in the chat, and maybe just for Lars. Question, he was the first to present, as we are all also with the RECONECT project, we are trying to contribute to the development of the reference base, which means that we develop solutions that are easy or suitable for upscaling in certain areas. How did you approach this challenge? Because you have very specific case, and also the application set of measures which you applied. Have you checked whether other areas would be also candidates for your approach? And have you thought of upscaling the measures and maybe challenges and issues which you're encountering with that?
Well, thank you very much for your question, Natasha. Well, you can see locally we have a great area for upscaling potential, which at the moment, it covers at least up to about approximately 1,000 hectares, and which the project area only covered around 40 hectares. So you can see there's quite a large potential for this. And also generally in Denmark, if you just look at Denmark, we have with the coastline around up to 8,000 kilometers. We are dealing with many areas where especially covers the areas where we have sort of these, you can say, protected, not directly at the North Sea, but in the inner fjords, where we have many of those cases where we can do that. Typically it covers areas where it has been you can say more or less reclaim directly from the sea, or reclaim from the salt marshes. Those areas would typically be appropriate for this type of solution. But then again, also to answer some of the other questions that has been in the chat, of course, this is dependent on a different use of land, and we need to go into discussion with the landowners, which we also have done in this case, and the solution here was to compensate them financially, but at the same time they were also the protection of the land behind the dike also improved. So you can say they would have to sort of give up some of their land. They're still owners of the land, actually, in front of the dikes, but to give up some of the land where would be flooded eventually even more, and then sort of to improve the areas behind the dike. So it was like a give and take from their side. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I mean, thanks also for anticipating this question, because it was posed to all participants or all presenters. And I would just like to pose the same question to Guido, because he also got another question related to the co-creation involvement of stakeholders. So the land acquisition and involvement of stakeholders. Maybe if you can just say some words on that, Guido.
Thank you for your question, Natasha. Yes, it is a very big problem, because as we know, making interventions in private areas is not so easy. You have to deal with stakeholders, with private owners, which are usually more than one. So it is a very, very big issue. In general, we deal with the problem of stakeholder involvement in Portofino area, thanks to the existence of a peculiar body that is present here, which is called the park community, that group up different kind of stakeholders, starting from food trailers to tourist facilities operators, municipalities, and so on. Even different kind of associations, private associations. So this was the way we involved the stakeholders. But regarding the interventions, some kind of interventions like the ones, for example, on stone wall terraces, we had to face solutions where we knew that the private owners were available. I mean that, for example, in San Fruttuoso area, we involved FAI, which is the Fondo per l'Ambiente Italiano, which is a private association with that owns cultural heritages, and so they are, they are sensible to the problem. They are available to collaborations and so on. So it is, we dealt with such a kind of barrier in such a way.
Thank you very much. Mario, also the question for you, how about the land acquisition in your case? And also, I don't know if there is a chance or a possibility that the government buys the land before, how this procedure was done, because it was done before the RECONECT project. So you're bringing that experience also in the project.
Yeah, thank you. A short answer, the river restoration, as many restoration projects in Switzerland, is always a long process. We try to involve really all stakeholders, and usually the cantons who are responsible for the water courses try to buy all the land that is necessary for the nature-based solution. So they either buy it or they exchange land, usually with farmers or communities, in order to own this land, so that there's no conflict. As you saw in the case that I showed, when the river was cutting into the shoreline a lot, then of course there was this concern, and that's why there was this second intervention done. But usually the land is bought. I hope this answers the question.
Yeah, thank you very much. Also interesting approach. Like in rich communities, it's also possible to get it bought by the government. True. I don't know if it's upscalable solution. We can apply it worldwide. But still, for Christian, I mean, you have presented a solution which is a kind of a smart NbS, what we have just discussed, and you are acquiring less land. I mean, like you would demand less. I mean, in ideal case, and you have shown that your case study and kind of your NbS already worked and yield results. I mean, during the last flood event, but maybe it's a challenge also to communicate such a solution to the politicians and decision makers. And how was the experience in your case? I mean, maybe you can just say something about this kind of influencing the policy and communicating with the politicians at different levels, of course. Yeah.
Yes, I think reaching political decision takers is always quite difficult. I think in all countries, the interest of by the election, meaning usually a politician is planning from 5 to 5 years, and he's always looking after his clientele who might be voting him or not. So this is always overshadowing some political decision taking without any doubt. But what I've perceived so far, I felt it uppermost important to keep the political decision takers always well informed, and we had the possibilities as project to expose rather frequently at the regional council of the borough of Bergedorf, where we could inform political decision takers directly from the project towards the politicians and the representatives of the parliament, which is quite not so common. And that worked out to be a good platform for us exposing our thoughts and approach among the local politicians and the decision takers. That is very important. We have also included stakeholders from the borough of Bergedorf, the Department of Water Management, which I perceive also as extremely important, that the stakeholders which are part of your project are really intensively involved in the project, because without acceptance, you will hardly make it with nature-based solution approaches. And what is very difficult in Hamburg is the fact that basically every plot of land is given an assignation or is under use or is already planned or dedicated to some future use. That makes it extremely complex in the area. And buying areas of land or exchanging them is a rather difficult task in Hamburg, as many farmers by tradition will not sell you a square meter voluntarily unless you don't pay them the amount they expect. But by law, we have certain regulations that we cannot pay hundreds of euros per square meters, as perhaps some stakeholders would wish for, but we can only pay what the land is worth, and that is agricultural land. And that could also pop up as a conflict, if you like. But I think that direct information of the public as well is a very important issue. We made a so-called campfire event where we met representatives of public organizations and NGOs and asking them what their vision of the area could be or would be in the case XYZ is happening in the area. That was quite an experience, and I was rather surprised how open-minded also the public participation audience took place, as I would have expected more skepticism from also the public organizations being involved in the process. But perhaps the flood event in 2022, where nearly it came to a catastrophe, helped us as a positive push for the hybrid nature-based solution we are trying to implement in Hamburg. Yeah. So this is a positive news from my point of view, if you like.
It also shows the importance of those co-creation process and stakeholder involvement.
Definitely.
I think all presenters would agree on that. And what we also had during the project lifetime. There's still a few questions left, especially the one related to the cost-benefit analysis. I mean, the financial justification for the implementation of NbS. But I think cost-benefit analysis will be one of the topics of our following webinars. So Mark, Ehrlich, I would like to ask you to stay tuned. So we address those questions also in the following our following webinar. But you can also, I mean, if there are still questions which appear after the webinar or during the webinar, you didn't post them in the chat, you can also contact the presenters directly. As Alexandra announced, we'll post the presentations. This webinar is now being recorded, so you will have access to the presentations and also to the contacts of the presenters, so you can also approach them with your questions or issues they would like to discuss. At this point, I would like to thank you all, I mean, particularly the presenters, for interesting presentations. I mean, behind them, it's a lot of motivation, a lot of work, a lot of contribution and commitment, which I hope also the participants could feel and see. And we are really looking forward to the webinar number 3 and also to welcome you there as well. So we continue telling our RECONECT story in different parts, and that you will also join us in that way. So thank you very much to all, and have a nice day, and see you hopefully next time.